Silence is a true friend who never betrays. My friends, let that sink in. The world tells you that silence is weakness, that if you don't explain yourself, if you don't fight back, you'll look like a loser. But here's the truth. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is the fire that burns louder than any words. It is the echo that follows them into the night when the crowd is gone and the distractions fade. Before we go deeper, press that like button, subscribe, and stay with me until the end. Because what I'm about to show you isn't just another talk about heartbreak. It's about power. It's about clarity. It's about you rising from the ashes of what tried to break you. And if you skip this, folks, you'll miss the part that will change how you see yourself forever. Now, hey folks, imagine this. You're a lighthouse, tall, steady, glowing in the middle of a storm. Ships come toward you. Some are grateful. You guide them to safety. Others, they take your light for granted. They dock, drain your energy, and sail away without so much as a thank you. And here you stand, thinking maybe your light isn't enough. But here's the twist. Your light was never weak. Your silence, your calm glow, was the only real guide they ever had. And when they leave, when they think they can navigate without you, they end up lost in the dark seas, haunted by the memory of the one light that never flickered. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." Think about that. They expected you to scream. They expected a performance, drama, chasing, begging. They expected you to mirror their chaos. But you did something far more terrifying. You went quiet. You refused to feed their ego. And that silence, that was the punch they never saw coming. Here's the lie they sold you. If you go quiet, you'll be forgotten. If you stop explaining, you'll look cold, maybe even heartless. But the truth is far sharper, my friends. Your silence isn't rejection. It's revelation. It forces them to face themselves without your kindness covering their flaws. Silence is a mirror, and in that mirror they see the truth they've been running from. And trust me, folks, they don't like what they see. Let's add a little fun here. Ever seen a kid throw a tantrum in the store, rolling on the floor, screaming, demanding candy? Now picture the parent just standing there, calm, arms crossed, saying nothing. Who looks foolish now? Not the parent, the child. That's exactly what happens when you stop reacting. Their chaos starts to look childish, while your silence stands tall. And here's what's wild. Regret doesn't come in like a thunderstorm. It creeps in slowly, in the quietest moments. When they're scrolling through their phone at night, laughing at shallow conversations, and suddenly feeling empty. When they hear your name and their stomach twists. When they realize they can replace your body, but never your soul. That's the fire. That's the silence burning them in regret. So don't let anyone fool you. Your silence is not weakness. It's your crown. It's your fortress. It's the weapon they can't touch. You don't need to scream, my friends. You don't need to explain. You don't need to prove a thing. You only need to walk quietly, and in that quiet, they will hear the roar of their own regret. So here's what I want you to write in the comments right now. A simple affirmation, 3 words, I choose silence. Write it for yourself, show it to the world, let it echo in your heart. And don't forget, press that like button, subscribe, and stay with me. Because this journey we're on together is just beginning, and the next part will open your eyes to the true power of your silence. Number 1, they expected your reaction. You gave them silence. The greatest remedy for anger is delay. Seneca said that nearly 2,000 years ago, and my friends, it still cuts deep today, because here's the truth. Nothing shakes someone more than expecting your fire and receiving your calm. They braced themselves for your explosion. They rehearsed for your meltdown. They prepared their excuses, their counterattacks, their stage performance. And then, silence. You didn't scream. You didn't explain. You didn't beg. You just stepped back, and that was the move that burned them more than any words ever could. Imagine this. A magician stands on stage, smiling at the crowd, waving his wand, ready to perform the trick he's done 1,000 times. He pulls out the hat, pauses for effect, reaches inside, only this time nothing comes out. No rabbit, no dove, nothing. The crowd goes quiet. The silence swallows him whole. His entire identity, built on smoke and mirrors, collapses in that moment because the one thing he depended on, the audience's reaction, is gone. That's exactly what happens to people who feed off your responses. They thrive on your explanations, your defenses, your anger, your tears. Without them, the stage is empty, and they are left standing there, sweating under the spotlight of their own actions. But here's where fear creeps in for you. You start to ask yourself, what if they think I don't care? What if they believe I'm weak because I didn't fight back? What if my silence makes me invisible and forgettable? These questions gnaw at you in the quiet hours, don't they? Because silence feels unnatural at first. It feels like surrender. We're taught from childhood to defend ourselves, to explain, to justify, to prove that we were right and they were wrong. Walking away without a word feels like losing. But, my friends, that's the biggest lie of all. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Think about that. They expected you to mirror their chaos. They expected you to match fire with fire. They expected you to lose yourself in the noise they created. But instead, you became water. You became calm. You refused to play the game. And nothing terrifies manipulators more than someone who doesn't follow their script. Let's break the lie right here. They will tell you silence means you gave up, that you lost, that you were too weak to stand your ground. But silence doesn't mean you gave up. It means you stopped feeding them. You stopped giving them the oxygen their ego needed to keep the fire alive. And here's the funny part. They'll pretend not to care. They'll act unbothered, unaffected, like your silence doesn't even register. But don't be fooled. It does. Because late at night, when the laughter dies down, when the phone grows quiet, when the distractions lose their shine, what echoes in their mind is not your words, it's your absence. Let me give you another picture. Imagine someone addicted to sugar. Every day they eat it, they thrive on it, they depend on it. Then one day, it's gone. At first, they laugh it off. They pretend they don't need it. But then the cravings kick in, the headaches start, and suddenly the absence of what they once took for granted becomes unbearable. That's what your silence is to someone who lived off your reactions. They didn't notice the air when it was there, but once it's missing, they can't breathe. And here's the paradox. You think silence makes you disappear, but in reality, silence makes you unforgettable, because presence can be ignored, words can be twisted, but absence lingers like a shadow they can't shake. It becomes the chill in the room, the missing warmth they can't replicate, the quiet ache that follows them everywhere. Seneca also wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Isn't that exactly what you've been doing? Imagining them happy without you, imagining that your silence doesn't matter, imagining that they've moved on without a second thought. But reality is different. Reality is that silence haunts. It grows louder with time, louder with every shallow conversation that doesn't measure up, louder with every new face that fails to give them the depth you did. Louder with every moment they realize that noise cannot replace peace. But let's be real here. Choosing silence is not easy. It feels like walking away from a battlefield without swinging your sword. It feels like surrendering when everything inside you wants to scream your truth. And yet, silence is not surrender. It is discipline. It is wisdom. It is you choosing not to throw yourself into a fight designed to drain you. A lion does not argue with hyenas. A king does not answer every peasant throwing stones at the castle wall. Silence is not weakness. Silence is dignity. It is the quiet reminder that your value does not need defending. And isn't that the hardest part, my friends? To resist the urge to defend yourself, to resist the instinct to say, I was the one who was loyal. I was the one who stayed. I was the one who gave everything. But let me ask you, do you really need to prove what is already written in your actions? Do you really need to argue for your worth when your silence speaks it louder than your words ever could? Here's the truth. They can twist your words. They can dismiss your tears. They can gaslight your explanations. But they cannot escape the mirror your silence holds up. That's why it shakes them more than anything else. Because silence strips away the distractions. It forces them to sit with themselves, and that is the one person they have been running from their whole life. So if you're sitting here today wondering if your silence matters, let me give you the answer. Yes, it does, more than you know. Your silence is the rug pulled from under their feet. It is the moment the show stops. It is the one act they can never spin into their favor. And whether they admit it or not, whether they show it or not, they feel it. So, my friends, here's what I want you to write in the comments right now. I choose silence. Write it not for them, but for you. Show it to yourself. Show it to the world. Let it echo in your heart. Because your silence is not emptiness. It is your crown. It is your power. It is your victory. And stay with me, because what comes next will reveal why silence doesn't just shake them, it burns them. It becomes the fire of regret they can never put out. Number 2, silence is the mirror. They can't escape. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Marcus Aurelius wrote that centuries ago, and my friends, those words still sting like truth today. Because when the noise stops, when the arguments end, and when your voice is no longer there to soothe, defend, or explain, all that's left is the echo of their own mind. And let me tell you something. Most people can run from your words, they can twist your explanations, they can deny your accusations, but they cannot outrun the silence that forces them to face themselves. Silence, my friends, is the mirror they can't escape. Imagine a room lined wall to wall with mirrors. No matter where you turn, no matter where you hide, there's a reflection staring back. Now imagine someone who has spent their entire life with the curtains drawn over those mirrors. They could act however they wanted, say whatever they pleased, because they never had to look at themselves. You were that curtain. Your patience, your forgiveness, your constant giving covered the reflections of their flaws. They didn't have to face who they were because you shielded them with your kindness. But the day you went silent, the curtains fell. Suddenly, every mirror screamed the truth. And let me tell you, the truth is not flattering. It burns. Here's the fear that eats at you. What if they don't even think about me? What if my silence means nothing to them? What if they move on without a scratch? That's the story your mind plays on repeat in the dark hours, and it feels so real. But my friends, reality is far different. The performance they put on, new faces, loud laughter, pictures online that look like paradise, that's not peace. That's performance. And performances always end. When the curtain falls, silence is waiting backstage with a mirror that does not lie. Epictetus once said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. Your silence is the refusal to be complicit anymore. They wanted your reaction, because your reaction gave them a distraction. Your anger made them feel justified. Your explanations gave them ammunition. Your tears gave them proof they still had power. But silence starves them. Silence turns the spotlight back on them. And now, without your reactions to point at, without your words to twist, they are forced to confront the one enemy they can't manipulate: themselves. Picture a thief who breaks into houses every night, always confident because no one calls the police. They keep stealing, keep smiling, keep running. But then one night, they break in and the house is empty. No valuables, no people, nothing to take. Silence. Suddenly, it's not just a failed robbery, it's exposure. Because silence means the game is over. And that's what your silence does to them. It pulls away the excuses. It ends the game. It forces them into the empty house of their own soul, and they don't like what they find there. But let's be honest, silence doesn't feel like strength at first. It feels like weight. It feels heavy because discipline always feels heavy in the beginning. It's easier to text, easier to explain, easier to scream, "Do you even care?" But silence is choosing strength over impulse. Silence is choosing to let the storm pass instead of running into it. And yes, at first it feels like you're the one suffering, carrying all the weight while they carry on freely. But here's the paradox. Over time, silence becomes light. Every day you don't break it, you reclaim more of yourself. And for them, every day you don't break it, the mirror becomes clearer. Let me break another lie right here. They thought your silence meant submission. They thought it meant you had nothing left to say, that you were too broken to fight. But in truth, your silence is their teacher. It teaches them patience has limits. It teaches them kindness can walk away. It teaches them that when you take away your voice, you also take away their excuse to ignore their own. Silence is not absence. It is confrontation of the most brutal kind, because it doesn't argue, it doesn't defend, it just exists. And existence, my friends, is undeniable. Seneca once said, "Fire tests gold, adversity tests brave men." Your silence is that fire. It tests them in ways your words never could. Words can be dodged, deflected, denied. But silence leaves them stripped bare. It removes the comfort of deflection and forces them to see what they truly are when no one else is carrying their weight. And in that raw reflection, regret begins its slow burn. But let's talk about the fear you feel, because while silence is shaking them, it also shakes you. You worry, what if they never realize? What if they never regret? And my friends, here's the truth you must hold. Their realization is not your responsibility. Regret is not your prize. Their reflection is not your problem. Silence is not about them. It's about you. About reclaiming your energy, about breaking the cycle, about refusing to betray yourself one more day by explaining to someone who never wanted to listen. Think about it this way. A lion doesn't roar at every hyena circling around. A king doesn't step down from his throne to argue with every fool in the crowd. Your silence is that lion's walk. It's that king's crown. It's the unspoken reminder that you don't need to defend what is already true. Because truth doesn't beg. Truth doesn't argue. Truth just stands, quietly, unshakably, until the noise dies and the echo remains. So don't let anyone tell you silence is weakness. Weakness is needing to shout just to feel heard. Weakness is needing to lash out just to feel powerful. True strength is restraint. True strength is letting silence speak for you, because silence cannot be twisted. Silence cannot be mocked. Silence cannot be used against you. It is the one weapon they cannot disarm, the one move they cannot predict. And here's the irony. They might tell themselves, "You don't matter." They might perform for the world like they've already forgotten you. But in the quiet, in the late hours, in the empty spaces, silence is waiting for them. And silence is a teacher far more merciless than you ever could be. It will whisper, "This is who you are without them." And that whisper is louder than any words you could have spoken. So, my friends, if you're wondering whether your silence matters, whether it has weight, let me assure you, it does. More than any argument, more than any explanation, more than any tear you could shed. Because silence forces reflection, and reflection is unavoidable. They can run from you, but they can't run from themselves. Here's what I want you to do right now. Write it in the comments. Show yourself, show the world, show everyone who ever doubted you. Write these 3 words, "I am the mirror," because that's exactly what your silence has made you. You are not chasing to be seen. You are not begging to be understood. You are reflecting their truth back to them whether they want it or not. And that, my friends, is power. Stay with me, because we're only getting started. We've seen how silence shakes them, how it forces them into the mirror they've avoided their whole life. But next, we're going even deeper into the storm your absence created, and why the calm you left behind became the chaos they now sit in. And trust me, that's where regret begins to burn hotter than fire. Number 3. Your absence creates their storm. When the soul is without a pilot, the winds of fortune drive it onto the rocks. Seneca said that, and my friends, it slices right into the heart of this truth. Because when you walked away in silence, when you chose not to fight, not to explain, not to keep holding up what was crumbling, something happened that they never expected. Their storm began. Not around you, around them. Because you see, while you were there, while your voice was steady, while your presence was constant, they thought they were the strong one. They thought you needed them to survive their chaos. But the truth is, you weren't surviving their storm. You were calming it. You weren't the fragile one. You were the pilot. And the day you left, the ship started sinking. Picture this. Imagine a house built on sand. For a while it looks fine. They paint the walls, hang up the pictures, invite people inside. On the surface it seems steady. But every gust of wind, every tremor, every shift in the ground reminds you that the foundation is weak. Now imagine you're the one holding up the beams, the one bracing the walls in silence, the one keeping the illusion standing. Then one day, you step away. What happens? The roof caves in, the cracks spread, the entire thing begins to collapse. That's what your absence does. It doesn't leave them with nothing. It leaves them with the truth. And the truth is, their stability was never real. It was borrowed from you. But here's where fear gets loud for you. You ask yourself, what if they're fine without me? What if they don't even notice? What if my absence doesn't matter? Those thoughts keep you up at night, don't they? But my friends, let me break that lie. Your absence always matters more than your presence when someone has grown addicted to your giving. Presence can be taken for granted. Presence can be ignored. But absence? Absence cannot be dismissed. It's the ache in the chest when the room feels too quiet. It's the empty seat at the table that no one can fill. It's the calm that used to soothe the storm, now missing when the chaos screams the loudest. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." You see, they never learned to govern themselves. They leaned on you as their anchor, their compass, their calming shore. They laughed at your patience, mocked your loyalty, dismissed your silence. But when you walked away, they lost the stability they had stolen from your strength. They became the soul without a pilot, tossed in waves they can't control, driven onto rocks they cannot escape. Imagine someone walking with a crutch for years. The crutch isn't perfect. Sometimes it wobbles, sometimes it creaks, but it holds them up. They depend on it so completely, they forget how to walk without it. Then one day, it's gone. Suddenly, every step feels impossible. Every move hurts. Every attempt at independence exposes how weak their legs really are. That's what your absence feels like to them. They may cover it up with noise, with new faces, with laughter that sounds hollow even to their own ears. But deep down, they know. They know they leaned on you more than they ever admitted. They know they mistook your strength for weakness. And now, without you, they are forced to stumble on legs that were never steady. But let's talk about the irony here. They once believed you were the fragile one. They thought you were too emotional, too forgiving, too dependent. But when you left, the roles flipped. Because the truth is, the storm was never inside you. It was inside them. You were the calm. You were the eye of the hurricane. You were the stillness holding back the chaos. And now that you're gone, the winds roar, the waves crash, and they have no shelter. Think about it. They called you dramatic. They called you weak. But who's left shaking in the storm now? Not you. You've found the shore. You've built a shelter out of peace, silence, and discipline. You're not even in the storm anymore. You're watching it from a distance, not with revenge in your heart, but with clarity in your mind. You finally see what was always true. You were the calm they could never live without. Here's another picture for you. Imagine a child throwing tantrums, screaming, kicking, yelling. The parent picks them up, calms them, soothes them, day after day. The child grows used to it. They come to expect the comfort. But one day, the parent doesn't come running. Suddenly, the child is left alone in their fit, and the silence feels unbearable. That's what your absence is like. It doesn't just expose their immaturity, it exposes their dependence. They weren't strong without you. They were comfortable because of you. But let's be real, my friends. Choosing absence is not easy. It feels like ripping yourself away from something familiar, even if that familiar was toxic. It feels like betraying yourself at first, because you've been trained to believe that staying, explaining, and enduring makes you strong. Walking away feels like giving up. But the truth is, walking away is the bravest thing you can do, because it proves that your peace matters more than their storm. It proves that you finally value yourself more than the chaos you used to settle for. And here's the part they'll never admit. They're terrified of your absence, because selfish people depend on presence. They depend on you being there to absorb their tantrums, to catch their excuses, to shield them from themselves. When you leave, they're left exposed. Every room feels louder with silence. Every night feels longer without your reassurance. Every conversation feels shallow compared to the depth you once brought. That's the storm they sit in now, not yours, theirs. They can fill the room with bodies, but the absence of you weighs heavier than all of them combined. They can scroll endlessly, but the silence between notifications screams louder than any text you could have sent. They can laugh in public, but when the curtain falls, the quiet reminds them of what they lost. Absence is unforgettable. Absence is undeniable. Absence is the storm. And here's the lie you must stop believing, that leaving makes you invisible. No, my friends, leaving makes you unforgettable. Because they may not notice your presence when it was constant, but they will always feel your absence once it's gone. Seneca also said, "It is the power of the mind to be unconquerable." But here's the catch. They never trained their mind. They never built discipline. They never faced themselves. They leaned on you to silence the noise, to calm the storm, to give them strength. And when you walked away, their mind turned against them. That's why their storm doesn't end, because storms don't calm themselves. They need stillness. And you were that stillness. Without you, there's only thunder. So let me leave you with this truth. Your absence is not cruelty. It is not revenge. It is not punishment. It is clarity. You didn't leave to destroy them. You left to protect your peace. And your peace is louder than their storm. That's why absence is powerful. That's why silence shakes them, because it forces them to confront the chaos they created without the shelter you once gave. My friends, write this in the comments right now. I am peace. Write it to remind yourself, not them. Write it to show the world that you are not the storm. You are the calm they lost. You are the anchor they can't replace. You are the stillness they never appreciated until it was gone. And stay with me, because what comes next is even more powerful. We've seen how your absence created their storm, but now we're going to talk about the moment they realize something far worse, that no distraction, no replacement, no performance can ever fill the space you once held. And that, my friends, is when regret stops whispering and starts roaring. Number 4, when they realize they can't replace you. You don't know the value of water until the well runs dry. That old proverb has echoed for centuries because it carries a truth people rarely want to face. And my friends, that truth is exactly what happens when your silence stretches, when your absence becomes undeniable, when the patience they drained is no longer there to be taken. At first, they tell themselves it's fine. They'll just find another you, someone else to fill the space, to give the attention, to provide the comfort. They believe you are replaceable, but then the lie cracks. Because what you gave them wasn't surface level. It wasn't noise, it wasn't entertainment, it wasn't performance. What you gave them was depth, and depth once tasted makes everything else feel shallow. Imagine this with me. You've been drinking from a fresh mountain spring for years. The water is clean, cold, life-giving. You don't even realize how rare it is because you're used to it. Then one day, that spring is gone, and someone hands you a cup of salt water. It looks like water, clear to the eye, but when you taste it, it burns your throat, dries your tongue, and leaves you thirstier than before. That's what happens when they try to replace you. On the surface, it seems similar: companionship, conversation, intimacy. But beneath it, there is no depth, no patience, no truth. And every sip reminds them of what they threw away. Here's where the fear claws at you. You ask yourself, what if they find someone better? What if they move on happily and forget me entirely? That question keeps you awake at night. But let me break that lie, my friends. They can find someone louder. They can find someone flashier. They can even find someone who entertains their ego more. But what they cannot find is someone who gives them the sanctuary you once gave. Because what you offered wasn't common. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't a performance. It was real. And real cannot be duplicated. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Your presence was right. Your love was true. And now everything they chase feels counterfeit. And do you know what's worse than having nothing at all? Having something fake after you've known what's real. They can drown themselves in noise, but somewhere inside, they'll always hear the silence you left. They can fill their life with new faces, but somewhere in those faces, they'll see the outline of yours. They can flood their days with distractions, but when the curtain falls at night, regret creeps in like smoke under the door. Let's talk about the illusion they lived under. They thought your patience was endless. They thought your loyalty was unbreakable. They thought your forgiveness was guaranteed. So they tested you, again and again. They thought no matter how far they pushed, you would always bend, always return, always forgive. But when you finally went silent, when you walked away without announcement, it stunned them. They didn't prepare for that version of you, the version that values peace over proving, dignity over drama, silence over noise. And in that shock, the realization hits: I lost the one I can't replace. But let's add another metaphor here. Imagine someone who spends their life in noisy nightclubs, flashing lights, loud music, cheap thrills. Then one day, they stumble into a quiet cathedral. The stillness, the sacredness, the echo of something deeper. It shakes them. They might not even understand it at first, but it marks them. It leaves a memory they can't forget. That's what you were for them. And once they've experienced that cathedral of depth, everything else feels like noise. They can run back to the lights and the distractions, but deep down, they'll always feel the loss of that sacred space. Seneca once wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." You were that gem, shining despite the friction, despite the trials they brought. You endured storms with patience. You gave love without conditions. You stayed longer than you should have. And when they lost you, they didn't just lose a person. They lost the mirror that made them look better than they were, the anchor that made them feel steadier than they deserved. No matter who they find next, that truth haunts them. Because most people don't forgive like you. Most people don't listen like you. Most people don't stay when things get ugly. And every time they realize that, regret deepens. But here's where it burns them the most. They thought you were replaceable. They believed patience like yours was common, loyalty like yours was average, love like yours was ordinary. But life has a way of proving otherwise. Because every shallow connection becomes a reminder. Every empty laugh becomes a shadow of what they used to have. Every new face that doesn't measure up becomes proof of what they destroyed. And the irony? They'll never admit it. Out loud, they'll tell others you were too sensitive, too emotional, too much. They'll spin the story to protect their pride. But inside, in the quiet, when the mask slips, they know. They know they broke what can never be rebuilt. And here's the truth you need to hold. Their regret is not your prize. Their realization is not your responsibility. You don't need them to admit you're irreplaceable for it to be true. Because rare things don't need validation. Rare things don't chase recognition. Rare things are noticed the moment they're gone. And you, my friends, are rare. Think of it like this. A collector tosses away a diamond, thinking it's glass. They laugh, walk away, never realizing what they've thrown into the dirt. But years later, they search, they sift through piles of stones, and nothing shines the same. That's what happens when they try to replace you. They can search the world, but the glow they once had, the depth they once knew, the patience they once depended on, it's gone. And every imitation feels hollow. Now, I know the fear that still whispers to you. But what if they're happy without me? My friends, happiness built on distraction is not happiness. It's performance. And performances don't last. The curtain always falls. And when it does, the silence you left behind is waiting, unshakable, undeniable. So let me tell you this. You don't need to wait for their regret. You don't need to crave their recognition. The fact that they can't replace you is not your burden, it's their storm. Your focus isn't on proving your worth to them. Your focus is on rising, on building, on walking in peace they can no longer touch. So here's what I want you to write in the comments right now. Write these 3 words. I am rare. Write it to show yourself, to remind the world, to declare the truth. Because patience like yours, loyalty like yours, silence like yours, it's not common. And rare things don't beg to be valued. Rare things shine simply by existing. Stay with me, my friends, because we've seen how your absence created their storm, how your irreplaceability haunts them. But next, we're going even deeper into the fire of their ego. The way it burns when they see you rising higher, calmer, untouchable, while they sit in the ashes of what they lost. And that, my friends, is the part they can never forgive. That's where regret becomes unbearable. And that's where we're headed next. Number 5, their ego burns, but your soul rises. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Marcus Aurelius spoke those words, and my friends, they are the foundation of this truth we're about to uncover. Because when you walked away in silence, when you chose not to fight, not to scream, not to claw for attention, something powerful happened inside you. You began to rise, quietly, steadily, like the dawn breaking after the longest night. And that rise, that glow, that transformation, it sets their ego on fire. They expected collapse. They expected you to crumble without them, to beg for closure, to crawl back asking for scraps. In their mind, your silence wasn't strength, it was weakness. They thought it was just a matter of time before you cracked. They thought you'd be the one haunted, not them. But here's the paradox. They were your downfall while they were present. Their chaos chained you. Their manipulation drained you. Their neglect dimmed you. And the moment you stepped away, the chains shattered. In your silence you found wings, and nothing burns their ego more than realizing that your glow was never dependent on them. Imagine this with me. A firework explodes in the sky, loud, bright, dazzling. For a few seconds, all eyes are on it. Then it fizzles, fades, and the darkness returns. That's their ego. Flashy, noisy, desperate for attention, but temporary. Now imagine the sunrise. No noise, no begging for applause, no desperation. Just steady, undeniable light that transforms everything it touches. That's your soul rising. And they can't compete with that, because the firework always dies, but the sunrise cannot be stopped. Here's the lie you wrestle with late at night. What if they don't notice I'm doing better? What if my rise doesn't even matter to them? Let me tell you the truth, my friends. They notice. They always notice. Because ego feeds on comparison. It thrives on being above, on being the one in control, on being the sun others orbit around. And when they see you glowing without them, living, laughing, rising, it burns, because it exposes the lie they told themselves, that you couldn't survive without them. Seneca once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." And isn't that exactly what burns their pride? They wasted time trying to control you instead of growing with you. They wasted chances to rise with you because they were too busy dragging you down. And now, every moment they see you stronger, calmer, freer, they feel the weight of time slipping through their hands. That, my friends, is a burn that doesn't heal. Think about it. They told themselves you were needy, too emotional, too dependent. But when you went silent, when you chose to pour into yourself instead of them, who became needy? Who became restless? Who became dependent on the attention they could no longer steal from you? They did, because your silence didn't just expose their weakness, it magnified yours into strength. Picture a garden. For years you watered their soil. You pulled weeds, protected seeds, poured your energy into their growth. They gave little back, but they stood in that garden as if it was their own. Then one day, you stopped. You took your hands, your love, your patience, and you started planting in your own soil. And suddenly, their garden withered while yours began to bloom. Flowers opened, trees grew, fruit ripened, and nothing cuts deeper than watching the garden you neglected thrive in someone else's care. Especially when that someone else is the very person you thought you had broken. But let's be honest, this rise wasn't easy for you. There were nights you doubted yourself, nights you stared at your phone, tempted to break the silence, tempted to prove your worth one last time, days when you replayed conversations, aching to scream, "I was the one who gave everything," and yet you held your ground. And in that discipline, you rose, because rising isn't loud, rising isn't instant, rising is slow, steady, and it takes more courage than revenge ever will. Revenge is easy. Anyone can lash out. Anyone can post something online to provoke. Anyone can try to make the other jealous. That takes no strength. But to rise, to stay silent while your heart screams, to keep walking while your pride begs you to turn back, to choose peace when war would feel easier. That is power, that is rare, that is the kind of strength that no one can touch. And here's the beauty. Your rise is not about them. It's about you. It's about reclaiming the time you wasted. It's about pouring love back into yourself. It's about discovering that your worth was never tied to their validation. And when they see that, when they realize they no longer have the power to define you, their ego cracks. Because their pride depended on you staying small, on you staying reactive, on you staying chained. And your silence freed you from all of it. Now imagine an eagle. It doesn't waste time fighting with crows. It doesn't swoop down into the mud to prove itself. It simply rises higher. And as it climbs, the air grows thinner, too thin for the crows to follow. That's you. Your silence is the flight. Your rising is the altitude. And now they can't reach you. Not because you're hiding, but because you've outgrown their chaos. But here's where it cuts them the most. They can't twist this into their favor. If you argued, they could call you dramatic. If you begged, they could call you weak. If you lashed out, they could call you bitter. But silence, rising, thriving, that leaves them with nothing to say, because your life becomes the answer. Your peace becomes the proof. Your glow becomes the rebuke they can't escape. They'll never admit this out loud. Their pride won't let them. To the world, they'll say you changed, you became cold, you forgot them. But deep down, they know. They know the glow on your face is the glow they tried to dim. They know the calm in your silence is the strength they never thought you'd find. And that awareness, even if they never speak it, is what burns. But let me flip this for you. Their ego burning is not your concern. Your focus is not on their pain. It's on your rising. Because that's the ultimate Stoic move. You don't rise to punish them. You rise because peace is your birthright. You rise because clarity is your crown. You rise because nothing is more powerful than mastering yourself. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And that's what you've become in your silence, a master of yourself. So let me leave you with this affirmation. Write it in the comments. Show it to yourself. Show it to the world. Show it to everyone who doubted you. I rise higher. 3 words that define your path. Because you don't need their recognition. You don't need their apology. You don't need their validation. You only need to rise. And every inch you climb, every step you take, every moment you choose peace over noise, you prove that your silence was never emptiness. It was preparation. It was the deep breath before your wings spread. It was the dawn before the sunrise. Stay with me, my friends, because we've seen how their ego burns while your soul rises. But now, we're going to uncover something even more powerful, the truth about regret itself. The way it doesn't strike instantly, but creeps in slowly, relentlessly, always arriving too late. And trust me, that's where the fire of silence becomes inescapable. That's what we'll explore next. Number 6. Regret always arrives too late. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Seneca gave us those words, and my friends, if there's one thing regret proves, it's this. Regret does not strike in the heat of the moment. It does not appear while they're laughing loudly in front of others, while they're scrolling their phone with shallow distractions, or even while they're busy convincing themselves they've already moved on. No, regret is far more cunning than that. It waits, it hides, it lingers in the shadows until the lights go out and the curtain falls. And when silence becomes permanent, when your absence is no longer just a pause but a reality, regret finally shows its face. And when it does, it burns in ways they can never admit. Think of regret like a seed buried deep in the soil. At first, you don't see anything. The ground looks still. Weeks pass, maybe months. They go about their lives like nothing has changed. They laugh, they flaunt, they perform for the world. But underground, that seed is breaking, splitting, taking root. Slowly, quietly, until one day it cracks through the surface. That's how regret works. It doesn't announce itself with trumpets. It grows in silence, watered by every substitute that doesn't measure up, nourished by every shallow connection that reminds them of what they lost. And when it finally surfaces, it takes over everything. Here's the lie you've been fed. People who mistreat you walk away untouched, unbothered, free. They live their lives happily ever after while you sit with the pain. And in your darkest nights, that thought haunts you. What if they really don't care? What if they're better without me? But my friends, that's your imagination running wild, not reality. Because reality is this: nobody walks away from something rare untouched. They may pretend at first, they may convince others they're happier, but silence has a way of forcing reflection, and reflection is where regret is born. Picture this. Someone tosses away a diamond, believing it's glass. They walk away, laughing, careless. At first, they feel nothing. They tell themselves they didn't lose much. But later, they search. They sift through piles of stones. They dig through the dirt, and nothing shines the same. That's regret. It doesn't hit in the moment of loss. It hits when the truth becomes undeniable. I had something rare, and I destroyed it. But here's why regret hurts them so much more than anger ever could. When you were still present, when you were giving, forgiving, explaining, they couldn't see your value. They thought you'd always be there. They mistook permanence for weakness, patience for submission, love for dependence. But when you went silent, when the well ran dry, when your absence became real, that's when regret awoke. And by then, it was too late. Because regret always arrives after the chance is gone. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The loss of what is no loss to a man is no loss at all. But losing you, that was a loss. Not the kind of loss they could brush off or spin into a story for their pride. It was the kind of loss that digs into the bones, that lingers in the quiet, that stares back in the mirror. They'll never say it out loud, their pride won't allow it. But deep down, they know. They know you were the one who stayed longer than you should have, gave more than you received, forgave more than was reasonable. And the weight of that realization is the flame of their regret. Here's the paradox of regret. It shows up when it can no longer fix anything. When you were present, they didn't value you. When you left, they couldn't forget you. Regret arrives too late to bring healing, too late to undo the damage, too late to change the ending. It arrives like an unwelcome guest, tapping on the window in the dead of night, reminding them of everything they can never get back. And that, my friends, is why silence is so powerful, because silence is what plants the seed of regret. Now let's get real. You ask yourself, but do they really feel it? Or am I just hoping they do? That's the ache inside you, isn't it? The fear that maybe your silence didn't matter. But let me give you the truth. Yes, they feel it. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. But silence doesn't expire. It lingers. It grows louder with every substitute that doesn't compare. It grows heavier with every memory they can't erase. It burns hotter with every distraction that fades too quickly. Regret is patient. It knows how to wait until the mask slips. And when it does, it whispers the truth they can't deny. You lost something you'll never find again. Imagine someone at a crowded party, music blaring, laughter echoing, drinks flowing. They're surrounded, distracted, smiling for the cameras. But then the night ends. The people leave. The music stops. They're alone in the quiet. That's when it hits. Not during the noise, but in the silence afterward. That's when regret crawls in. That's when they hear the echo of what they had and the hollowness of what's left. Seneca also said, "Life is long if you know how to use it." And here's where regret cuts them deepest. because they realize life is long, but not long enough to undo the damage they caused. They realize they can fill it with people, with moments, with distractions, but none of it rewrites the chapter they destroyed. That's the kind of regret that doesn't fade. It becomes a scar, invisible to the world, but sharp to them every time they close their eyes. But my friends, here's what you must understand. Regret is not your burden to carry. It is not your prize, not your victory, not your trophy. You don't need to wait for it. You don't need to witness it. You don't need to crave their admission. Regret belongs to them. Silence belongs to you. And while they sit in the fire of their own choices, you walk free. Because silence wasn't just absence, it was liberation. It was you finally choosing to stop betraying yourself for someone who never saw your worth. Think of a phoenix. It doesn't rise from peace. It rises from fire, from ashes, from destruction. You walked through the fire of heartbreak. You sat in the ashes of loss. But instead of letting it bury you, you rose, stronger, brighter, unshakable. And as you rise, their ego burns, their pride crumbles, their regret deepens. Not because you set out to destroy them, but because you set out to heal yourself. And healing yourself was the one thing they never thought you'd do. So let me tell you this. Don't waste another second wondering if they regret it. They do. But it's not the regret you imagine. It's not the regret that comes with apologies, with closure, with confession. It's the regret that arrives too late. The regret that whispers instead of screams. The regret that haunts instead of heals. And that kind of regret, my friends, is the heaviest burden of all. So here's the affirmation I want you to write in the comments right now. I move forward. 3 words that separate you from them. 3 words that prove regret is their prison, not yours. 3 words that remind you that silence is your freedom. Because while they sit in the past, chained to what they destroyed, you are not bound there anymore. You are rising, you are building, you are moving forward. Stay with me, my friends, because we've seen how regret always arrives too late. How silence plants the seed and absence makes it grow. But next, we're going to go even deeper into the Stoic truth that revenge is never needed. That the life you build in peace is the only justice you'll ever need. And trust me, that lesson will set you free in ways you never imagined. Number 7, the Stoic truth. Revenge is never needed. He who is injured ought not to return the injury, for on no account can it be right to do wrong. Seneca spoke those words, and my friends, they pierce through centuries like lightning. Because let's be honest, after betrayal, after being used, after being discarded, you've felt that pull, haven't you? That temptation to prove a point, that craving to make them feel the pain they handed you. You imagine exposing them, embarrassing them, showing them that they messed with the wrong soul, and for a moment revenge feels sweet in the mind. But here's the Stoic truth. Revenge doesn't heal. Revenge doesn't free you. Revenge poisons you. Think of it this way. Imagine carrying around a bucket filled with poison. You grip it tightly, waiting for the moment to throw it at the one who hurt you. Step after step, day after day, you carry it, waiting for the perfect chance. But here's the problem. The longer you carry it, the more it spills. It seeps into your skin, your lungs, your soul. By the time you finally pour it out, you've poisoned yourself far more than them. That, my friends, is what revenge does. It promises satisfaction, but it delivers chains. Here's the lie people whisper in your ear. If you don't get even, they win. If you don't show them, they walk away untouched. But revenge is not justice. Revenge keeps you bound to the very person you want freedom from. It keeps you tied to their storm. And if you're still chained to their chaos, are you truly free? The Stoics understood this better than anyone. Marcus Aurelius said, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. Because when you stop trying to destroy them, you stop letting them destroy you. Now let me paint you a picture. Imagine a stage. They're on it, performing their drama, lies, manipulation, insults. They're ready for battle, armed with chaos. But instead of stepping onto the stage with them, you walk away. The lights go out. The audience leaves. Suddenly, their performance has no audience, no applause, no fuel. What is a performance without an audience? Nothing. That's the power of refusing revenge. That's the victory silence gives you. But let's be honest, silence doesn't give you that rush, does it? Revenge is instant. Revenge feels good for a second. It's a clapback, a sharp post online, a bitter text that proves you're not to be messed with. But here's the problem, it fades, and after it fades, you're left with emptiness. Silence, however, feels heavy at first. It feels like holding back a scream. But over time, silence transforms into peace. It rebuilds your strength. It creates a future that no longer depends on their recognition. That's not weakness. That's power. Let me break the biggest lie right here. If I don't hurt them back, it means they got away with it. No, my friends, nobody gets away with themselves. Life has a way of evening the scales without you lifting a finger. Call it karma, call it consequence, call it the law of nature. Whatever you name it, know this. People cannot outrun the weight of their own actions. And when you walk away in peace, you allow life itself to take over. And life, trust me, is a far harsher teacher than you ever could be. Picture a storm tearing through a forest. Trees snap, branches break, rivers overflow. It's chaos. But in the middle of the destruction, there's one tree still standing, silent, unmoved, unbroken. That tree doesn't scream at the sky. It doesn't throw lightning back at the clouds. It just stands, strong, resilient. That's you. That's the justice of silence. Your endurance is louder than any act of revenge ever could be. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Think about that. You couldn't control the betrayal. You couldn't control the disrespect. You couldn't control their choices, but you can control what you do now. And the greatest act of defiance is to not become what they tried to make you. They wanted you bitter, they wanted you broken, they wanted you reactive, but you became calm, you became disciplined, you became free. Let's flip the script for a moment. Imagine two fighters in a ring. One throws punches wildly, desperate to land a blow. The other just stands still, calm, refusing to fight. Who looks foolish now? Who looks desperate? That's the image your silence paints. They're swinging in the dark, and you've already left the arena. That, my friends, is what burns them more than any revenge ever could. Because here's the truth. Revenge says, "I want you to hurt," but healing says, "I no longer need you." Which one do you think terrifies them more? It's not the person shouting insults across the battlefield. It's the one who puts the sword down and walks away. Because walking away says everything revenge never could. I don't need your pain for me to have peace. And isn't that the freedom you've been searching for? To no longer crave their apology. To no longer crave their recognition. To no longer live chained to the need for closure they'll never give. That's what silence gives you. Not a short-term rush, but a long-term crown. A dignity that cannot be taken, a strength that cannot be twisted. But let's get honest again. It isn't easy. Silence takes courage. It takes discipline. It takes nights of biting your tongue, mornings of holding back the urge to prove yourself, days of resisting the temptation to show them. But every time you choose silence over revenge, you rise higher. Every time you refuse to lower yourself to their level, you grow stronger. Every time you walk away instead of striking back, you prove that peace is not weakness, it's mastery. And here's the irony. They expect revenge. They expect drama. They expect you to lash out so they can paint you as the villain. That's their script. That's their stage. But when you don't give it to them, when you stay silent, when you keep walking, they're left unsettled. They don't know how to fight silence, and that confusion becomes the seed of their regret. Marcus Aurelius also said, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one you don't need to argue, you don't need to prove, you don't need to fight. You only need to be, to live, to rise, to let your existence speak louder than your words ever could." That's the Stoic truth. That's why revenge is never needed, because the life you build in peace is the only justice that matters. So, my friends, here's the affirmation I want you to write in the comments right now. I choose peace. 3 words that end the cycle. 3 words that crown you with strength. 3 words that prove your silence is not weakness, but wisdom. And if this spoke to you, if it reminded you of your strength, if it showed you the fire hidden in your silence, press that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe to this channel. Because this journey we're walking together isn't about revenge, it's about rebirth, it's about power, it's about peace. And my friends, the best is still ahead.